So Deepak, Quizizz we here today is doing really great. Uh, and you are also present in more than 80% schools in the US. Can you take us to the start on what Quizizz was earlier? You were something called Vision Word, and you transitioned to Quizizz. And from the lens of a founder or a product manager, how did you go about the pivot?
I think we made a good choice in just picking a problem that was genuinely interesting to us. So we really wanted to just help get students engaged with learning. We went with a grand vision, I think, and we thought we'll make this really immersive game experience, but which baked in the learning. But what we realized is, after working on it over a year, we probably had content that any one user could use for maybe 2 3 weeks. That's where this idea came, like, why not open it up to teachers? They are obviously experts in their domain, and teachers didn't see necessarily even as a burden, but something that unlocked them, right? That we gave them this, fun experience, and we said, now you do what you're good at, just feed in the questions, and we'll do the rest. And that actually was very empowering to teachers.
Hi everyone, welcome to another episode of Minimum Viable Podcast, a podcast series brought to you by PM School. I'm Ankit, I'm the co-founder of PM School, and I co-host this podcast along with my good friend and co-founder Nikunj Sharma. Today on the podcast, we have a very special guest. We go back a long way. He's my batchmate and friend from BITS Pilani campus. We have known each other throughout these years. In fact, a really good friend with his co-founder as well. And it's always great to see, your friends doing great in life. So, welcome to the podcast, Deepak. Deepak is the co-founder of a tech startup called Quizizz. So yeah, Deepak, glad to have you here.
Yep, looking forward to this conversation as well. Yeah, glad to finally make it to the MVP podcast. Yes.
After chasing you multiple times. So yeah.
All right, let's get into it. So, Deepak, Quizizz we here today is doing really great. At least last I heard from Ankit, you were at 25 plus million MAU pre-pandemic. Sure, like you must have grown on top of it. And you are also present in more than 80% schools in the US. Considering this situation right now, right, being cash flow positive, can you take us to the start on what Quizizz was earlier? Like from what I've understood from Ankit, you were something called Vision Word, and you transitioned to Quizizz. You can talk about that pivot, and from the lens of a founder or a product manager, how did you go about the pivot? What insights did you get that made you realize, hey, we should move like the lever from A to B? And what were the pain points that you felt that you were going after the pivot?
Yeah, sure. So, just to set a little context, so me and Ankit, we quit our, jobs both as, software engineers. We were around 2 years into our careers at that time. So pretty early. I don't think we really knew what it meant to do a startup and all of that. But I think we made a good choice in just picking a problem that was genuinely interesting to us. So we, explored a lot of options and picked the education domain. We really wanted to just help get students engaged with learning, right? We felt like there are so many distractions, and uh, so much, so much more that could be done as well to make learning engaging and fun, right? It felt like people have done so well with social media and just videos and all this stuff, and it felt like education was too far behind, and students would really needed something to keep up, and so we felt it would be like a really fun thing to work on. That's how we started. And I think, just like I think, a lot of times, your first attempt isn't always the right idea. I think we were pretty naive about, what it means to build a product, what are the challenges we'll hit and all of that. So we, we went with a grand vision, I think, and we thought we'll make this really immersive game experience that, would just transport kids to another, world, which would basically be as fun as a game they, like to play, but which baked in the learning. And I think that's a great goal to have. And I think, someday somebody might do it. But what we realized is, for two people who had barely ever done something like this before, it was uh, just too much to handle, right? Making content, like just the educational material, making these game levels, making a good, game experience, graphics, there was so much that it took to make that product. And I think we made a good, you know, I think we were proud of what we built and people liked using it too, but we just realized we couldn't keep that going. After working on it over a year, we probably had content that any one user could use for maybe 2 3 weeks. It was spread across multiple grade levels and all of that. So somebody in one grade level couldn't get too far. And so the pivot to quizzes really came at a point where we were ourselves, wondering if we should keep going. We were, I think, pretty objective about it. I don't think we were too emotional. We used to always say, if there's not working out, we can always go back to good jobs. We are good programmers. There's, a good future on the other
I
side.
like I like the confidence.
Yeah, so I think it was always, if we're not moving forward fast enough, then there's no point of just doing it for the sake of it.
Absolutely.
At the same time, I think we like doing it, even for the sake of it, it was fun. So for us, so I think but with that, as we were seeing the struggle of, keeping up with the users' demand. So that's where this idea came, like, why not open it up to teachers, right? And again, I think in many ways, when you look back, if you could, always paint a picture of, like, we learned and identified this approach will work. Honestly, I think we were lucky as well. I think we made an assumption that teachers would be willing to make content. We made an assumption that, we had heard from students that they liked, they wanted a multiplayer experience. So we brought that aspect in. But these were all ultimately assumptions. We've made those kind of assumptions and been wrong, you know more often than we've been right. But I think, sometimes, luck works in your favor. And also, I think we were genuinely, working backwards from burning issues, versus trying to do something that, even the multiplayer came from saying that, we'll not be able to keep making new levels and graphics and, game mechanics forever. It takes a long time just to make a small one. And if my path to success is just churning those out month after month, we just can't do it. And so I think that was a good approach. I think I would advise that to anybody starting out is, don't go for lofty ambitions. Like, keep yourself very grounded to immediate problems. And if you solve those, especially, solving your users' problems, though I'd say we were honestly solving a bit of our problem and a bit of a user problem. When I say we were lucky, I think it was that one is that assumption turned out to be quite true. Teachers are very willing to make content. They are obviously experts in their domain, and I think that turned out true. But also that it actually was something that teachers didn't see necessarily even as a burden, but something that unlocked them, right? That we gave them this, fun experience, and we said, now you do what you're good at, just feed in the questions, and we'll do the rest. And that actually was very empowering to teachers. And that was something I don't think we quite understood when we were starting, but it's
Correct.
something that now is very core to everything we do. Yeah.
You also mentioned in our last conversation, right, that a few teachers started reaching out to you. So
Yeah.
talk to us about that. Like, how did you get that? Like, that's the most customer backward thing, which how you can build that. The users are also telling you that to build this.
Yeah. I think, yeah, that was a very powerful thing as well, right? So with Wizen World, we had a support widget, right? Which was one of those where you type in your query and it basically
Correct.
gives us an email,
Yeah.
and you can reply to that, or, there's an interface, of course. But one small difference, tweak we made is we put a live chat widget when we did quizzes. And honestly, I think that's probably one of the reasons we are probably still here today, because of just that one decision, because it helped us have so many good conversations, right? And it wasn't, I mean, it took a lot of effort to have those, right? I always try to tell, people starting off to really focus on speaking to users as much as you can, right? And I think people agree, but they don't quite internalize that, that everyone wants to be talking to users. But many times, if I just literally ask that question, like, in the last 1 week, how many people did you talk to? More often than not, the answer is zero, because,
Correct.
setting up a call and all that is not easy. And our answer in those days would have been at least four or five. because, and and literally, that's exactly the number, because we would have to be up from, say, our users happen to be in the US, because that's the market that turned out to, want what we were building. And, those users would come on around 7, 8 p.m., that's when, daytime would start there. And
Correct.
you would be up till 1 to 3 a.m. Uh, just to answer those chats, and it wouldn't be like they're coming nonstop, right? It would be I'd go to sleep at, say, midnight, and 1:30 a.m., that thing would buzz, and I would wake up and turn on the half awake, turn on the chat thing and start typing in. But I think having putting in that extra effort led to, and it was that, like, maybe one day I won't get a chat, maybe one day I'll get 2 3, but that was the volume. It wasn't really like I'm getting 10 chats a day, but each of those conversations was valuable, and it helped us identify, say, small issues in the product, or bigger things even. And when you're having that many conversations, and as the users grew, it became more, then it became 2 3 a day, 10 a day, and that became a treasure trove of insights that helped us navigate those first 5 6 months, and actually get to a product that the teachers were so happy with, because it was like, this is really doing what I needed to. And we actually really created a delta between us and every other product just by doing that for like 6 months. Yeah.
Deepak, just a follow-up to that, since obviously you have had this massive learning that you have to stay close to your users, do you like have like a internal mandate for your product managers, or how do you like weekly track or make sure that we are still close to the users? Because as the company grows, yeah, maybe you take constant effort to like attend a lot of calls and maybe reach out to your users, but making sure that everyone in your team is also doing that. Like, is there like a weekly cadence or meeting, or how do you make sure that we are still talking to users as you grow?
Yeah, I mean, I'd say we still haven't, been able to crack it necessarily, right? It is tough because, uh, as you get bigger, say in those days, honestly, it was easier for me because it was just, I didn't have anybody reporting to me. I didn't have to work with, stakeholders like, up and down. And it is honestly, it's a lot harder for a PM today at Quizizz to do that. Right, they have to work with different people, different teams, work, take order random feedback I might give them and all of that, right? So the half there, or 70% of the time easily goes into that, so carving out that time is not easy. And So what we try to do though is, we've done a lot of work. I think it's a constant process, right? To how to then, in this new system, it's honestly tough to do the old way, right? Uh, but I'd say, now we have a user research team that, say, at least, they are there to help, with setting up the calls, finding the right people to speak with. Now that itself, becomes difficult, earlier. So yeah, I think if I talk about, say, I can say 5 things we do today, right, to help do it. And it is really about keeping on adding to that list and looking at how to do those things better. But we, for some teams, we do have a live chat widget that actually does run. But now that can only actually work when you're working with a fairly small audience. Like, so now we turn it on in some countries where we are trying to figure out, what goes. Because if I turn that on in a US, there'll be so many queries coming in, and half of them won't be relevant to the PM, right? Or not half, probably 80%. And then if they are sorting these out, and like in the end, it becomes unmanageable. It becomes more of a time sink that somebody can afford to give. So, but in those limited countries, we are able to manage, because now I'm not getting 20 pricing related queries, and 20 things related to my school's onboarding, and things which are all unrelated. So then they can feel those, it does end up being a lot of just new user queries in a new market and all that. So that's one thing we do. So we in fact have 2 3 different companies chat widgets running in different countries, different user segments, just so that one chat widget works for a certain team, one works for a different. And it's very hacky, but it actually works. And if you don't do that, you'll not be able to have those conversations, because in theory it's all great, but practically doesn't work. But beyond that, we have like a user research team that helps set up calls. We have, like a user forum where they're actually voting on the, features that they want. So that's now like, for years we've been, aggregating this, and we've done hundreds of those things. And it makes it very easy for us to know what, say, any of the top requests actually have hundreds of comments about teachers talking about how they would want that feature to be. So now that's an investment we made, say, 5 years ago or even longer. But that is a huge trove of information for our, product managers. Uh, that gives you sort of a different insight, right? Similarly, we have, a forum for students as well, where they share. Then we engage with our community on Twitter. Uh, so it's like all these different channels, right? Like in our early days, honestly, we would often just be driven by how many people tweeted about that feature. If we saw 5 tweets instead of 2 tweets, it would be sort of a signal to us that, hey, something is clicking about this. There is a buzzworthy feature. Let's, go loud about this. Maybe this is a feature I can go to my influencers and, tell them to talk about. So I think there are so many different things that go into it. A lot more even, now we've set up play tests where, we've set up tie-ups with schools in Bangalore where our PMs go and actually visit, see it in action, because that's very different from, asking a teacher to do a task on a call where they have nothing else to do. You'll get their best performance versus the real performance, which is when they've got 20 kids making noise in front of them, and they've got, the bell is about to ring in 10 minutes, and all of this, real scenario, is very different. So all of these things, come into it, and each of them has taken, it takes months to set up those relationships with schools, for example, and everything takes effort, but we're always working on it.
Awesome. So, Deepak, you mentioned that in the first 5, 6 months, you pivoted to quizzes. You started seeing, massive traction and, good retention as well. And in the last call, you also said that the VCs also came back and said that we'll invest in you, right? So I assume, at that stage, you probably had an early semblance of what, we call a product market fit, right? So tell us some observations or, metrics or numbers that led you to believe that we are on the path to PMF.
Yeah, so I'd say again, it was very qualitative in those days, right?
Correct. Absolutely.
We honestly didn't have any analytics layer, right? We had Google Analytics and we had our database, right? That was what we used. And so, of course, we could look at metrics like signups happening and activities per day. It was the most basic of metrics that we would look at, right? How many people used quizzes today, right? How many people signed up? uh, we even a thing like retention was probably not something we were looking at. It was and again, it's one of those things I tell people, like, the simplest metrics are usually all you need. Beyond that, you just keep, well, all the metrics point in the same direction, you might as well just look at the simplest one and then get back to, what actually I think was a much more nuanced thing where we did spend time was actually talking to users, right? Because I can look at a metric on what was my, conversion rate of publishing a quiz or something that's going to say 70% or 30%. What do I do with that? You can't, you don't even know if it's good or bad, honestly, right? There are metrics that look bad, which we've tried to move for, 7, 10 years. And, we are, I mean, around 9 years old. So we've been looking at those metrics for 9 years and they're almost the same. And, you think you can improve it and all of that, but simply knowing that a number is at 30% doesn't do anything. Maybe 70 is the right number. Maybe, 25 is itself very good and you're already overachieving. And so, but talking to users, seeing users use it, I think those two things are quite different in themselves. But doing those two things is what actually drove us, I'd say. Right. We would hear from teachers about, can you add this thing? I'm having trouble with this. And because we were literally one click away, it was a chat widget was very familiar to teachers. They would just click and see, and we'd always be there. So that I think gave us the inputs we needed to actually, get to that. Probably the first, I mean, I know for sure the first thing we launched was probably quite bad, right? Because we worked on it like a month and launched it almost as an experiment. But because you're willing to listen to people, and quickly our metric was, or our approach was, can we launch this thing tomorrow, or today even? That was the urgency in our minds was this user might leave and I only have 15 users today. If I lose this one person, that's, whatever 8% of my user base gone. And, even when we got bigger, we actually realized, we worked in that, state of mind only that and you'd be surprised how few people will actually talk to you, right? Even when you have thousands of monthly or daily active users, you may get 5 6 people talking to you. Even today when we turn it on, we have a team of 3 4 people who manage, like millions of active people on the site. And it's not because they are doing 10 chats at a time, it's because people only reach out so much. And but if you each person who's reaching out to you, there are 1,000 people who have that same problem. So if you do it, you fix those problems as if each user matters, you will quickly get to a really amazing project. Yeah.
Got it, got it. So, Deepak, I understand early stage, you don't have a lot of numbers, and as you rightly said, it was about your connection and like speaking to users and some semblance of data. You try to sort of net the qualitative, like the voice of the
Yeah.
customer, and like you having like some benchmark. But how do you like know that, hey, this is what product market fit is? Because maybe like when you're starting out, you might start saying, hey, when I get 1,000 paying users, that's when I'm sure, hey, this idea is working. Did you
Hmm.
have like that North Star? It could be 1,000. I don't know what that number was. And once you reach that product market fit, how do you then change that benchmark to the next goal?
Yeah, so I would say, I mean, the number we looked at every day, maybe multiple times a day, was just how many people are,
Yeah.
daily active users, if, to put it that way. Right? We would just look at how many people are active, because that essentially bakes in your, in some ways, it bakes in retention plus growth, right? So
Right.
if you are growing, and the fact is, it, I'd say it wasn't that we had a fixed number like that, right? That's the truth.
Right.
That I don't think we were that evolved to be able to, identify such a number. And maybe I don't know if that was a good or bad thing, but we did look at daily active users or weekly, monthly active users, right? And we just every day, and because in that early stage, you're doing everything, right? You're also marketing, you're also building the product, you're also, looking at stability, engineering, everything. And we were 2 people basically doing it all. We had no, we had 1 or 2 interns who also helped, but uh, we so that is sort of the reality in that point, right? That you're juggling all these things. And so the one source of truth was, are there more people today than yesterday? And so if that wasn't, then we would say, okay, I need to go post somewhere or do something on marketing, right? And it wasn't that, here's my marketing plan. It was like just survival mode. And it was again with product, it was that we were driven more by every user. I need them to come back tomorrow, right? And we would try all kinds of things, right? We would be happy to talk to every person who came. I would, in initial days, that is the thing I tried, and I realized it doesn't work. I would ping a person and say, hey, I'm a human being here. Can I, can you tell me, I'm one of the developers of this thing, can you tell me what you want? And 90% or almost everybody will not reply to that. But being online, when they have a problem, I would, we would solve that problem, and then have a conversation after that, which would go beyond maybe just the problem they had. But in terms of knowing we had product market fit, uh, I would say, when the growth trajectory really took off, right? Because we had worked on Wisen World, and we knew what that growth trajectory looked like, which was a very sort of a straight line. right? But with quizzes, when we saw that more exponential curve, right? That is, I think, what, then it was sort of like 3, 4 months into quizzes, we were way above the numbers we had got to with Wise in World. And there also we were growing, it wasn't that it had sort of completely flattened out. But when in, 3 months we had, kind of doubled what, 3, 4 months we had doubled what we had in Wise in World. That sort of, I think, was the moment for us where we stopped looking at Wise in World completely, and we knew this is going somewhere. But I think maybe it was that, the trajectory being exponential. Yeah.
Got it. Thank you for that, Deepak. So, Deepak, the path to PMF, probably early stage, you need a lot of patience, right? And you guys have to be super focused with a small team on, hey, this is the problem you're trying to solve. At that time, you must have a lot of distractions, right? Wise in world, like figuring out, like maybe this is what users are saying. You also, I think, you were involved in an accelerator. How do you like stay focused on this like pivotal problem and not get distracted?
Yeah, so I think there are, as you mentioned, a lot of distractions, right? Trying to raise funds, and again, like you keep reading about startups doing this and that, and that's one of the things. Like even when people hear try to tell people like, just be driven by what you're seeing by first principles, because if you listen to what somebody like me is saying, that is sort of the rosy picture of what happened 9 years ago, and it leaves out like all the gritty details of the real struggles of, say, the how we juggled three free accounts to make our servers work, and all of that, because budgets were so tight. People ignore say to make it work, so much goes into it. I don't think we would be here today if we didn't operate on a shoestring budget. If we were very lavish with how we spent money, or all of that, or every trip was like, we would think about it 100 times, or every expense, like even a laptop was a thing. We would really think about every 1,000 rupees we spent. But coming to the you know these, so all these distractions are there. I think what helped us was to really just, I think we enjoyed building product. I think because we were engineers, I mean, that I think was a definitely a big enabler, right? The fact that we were engineers, so we could build the product, and we were. So I think we were definitely not great at marketing. We are definitely not great at, messaging and all of that. What we did well was that um, we could develop really quickly. We were really connected to users. So in a very reactive way, right? Again, not that we had a vision of what they needed. We, in fact, didn't know anything about how schools operate in the US. But we were very reactive and very quick to build. And we had, I think, a genuine empathy for solving for these users, for the teachers and students that we had on the platform. So I think uh, that is what we tried to spend most of the time on. And when we did get into the accelerator, it was a huge distraction, honestly, right? We ended up having to, we ended up traveling, meeting investors and other, all these smart people, honestly. But at that point in time, you don't need to just be meeting smart people. You need to be, just really knows to the grindstone, and be doing, looking at, I think uh, just those core metrics, right? Are there more users today than yesterday? If there aren't, what do you have to do? Do you need to post in 3 places? It is, really, because there are no magic, there's no silver bullet often, it is just you do enough to keep everything, keep the lights on everywhere. And though I think because we sort of enjoyed building the product, I think when we did more of, talking to people and all of that, we'd always get pissed off and be like, this is not really helping, and I don't like doing this either. So we would come back to building the product. But definitely, all these things end up being distractions, I'd say. I mean, I'd say also we probably wouldn't be here without the accelerator, because they did connect us to the investors who eventually helped us to raise the funds. But I think we would have gotten carried away with, say, listening to VCs in terms of what we need to be building, or going to Gyani experts to get their take on what we should be doing versus just listening to our users. I don't think we would have got
Correct.
to that. It really isn't that we became a rocket ship. It's like sort of we just survived. That stage is probably the way I look back at it. Yeah.
Correct. Like I can imagine both you and Ankit, both of you very humble and not the most extroverted folks from our batch. So I can imagine, and both of you are developers, right? So I can imagine the frustration or the distraction which you will feel, right?
Yep, yep.
Because like some people draw energy by being extrovert, right? But I can see that your energy gets sapped, right? Just before I move on to the next question, one question which I had, this US thing, was it by design that you were building products for the US market, or you just figured it out कि यार हमने बना दिया है product and we see good traffic from the US?
Yeah, I mean, definitely the second, right? We never built it. Again, I don't think we knew or we thought much about who will use this thing. I think, again, we were quite naive.
Correct.
We had some idea that, oh, this will be great, without really knowing what problem we are solving, honestly. But, we got lucky again there, that eventually we landed upon something that was a sort of a good way to solve a problem that actually was a problem for almost every teacher in the world, right? How to engage students in the class. So, but wait, sorry, what was the question? I
The
just.
question is, you guys built Wizen World and then you built Quizizz, right? So was it by design that it was built
Oh
for the
yeah,
US
the
market?
US fit, right? Yeah. So
Mm-hmm.
that's what, yeah. So once we built this, whatever project we had, which was Wizen World itself. So we spent around 9 months building Wizen World and launched it. And then the first thing was, how do we get users? Back to that, how do I
Mm-hmm.
get more users today than
Correct.
yesterday? And we did what we could, right? Which was, we had no money. So we posted it on forums and wherever online we could put it, right? And the reality in those days, and even today to a large extent, is all the platforms where educators would engage online. In fact, we weren't even sure it would be for educators. We just built it in a way for students to use. And then we found there were no real forums where parents were looking for this, or rather, we posted it wherever we could. We posted it in every Quora post related to this as a comment. We posted it on every forum that had to do with something like this. We posted it in every resource aggregator, list website of those kinds. Whatever we could find, every day we would Google and look for similar products where are they mentioned, whatever things we could think of, and we posted everywhere. But in a way, all roads led to Rome, was the situation where all of these were US websites, and it was US teachers that were active.
Correct.
US is a huge market in itself, but it's also far ahead when it comes to edtech adoption. They've had devices in the classroom. US is a very capitalist country, so they've got all this infrastructure in their schools since a long time. So, and so the maturity of those users was also quite far ahead. So they could actually run with a product like Quizizz. And so very quickly we found out that the US is the country that's looking for something. And that actually remained the case all till the pandemic pretty much. And that's when, today also, like, the US is, maybe 5% of the world population, but it used to be 90% of our users. During the pandemic, it was maybe 70, 80% or 70% of our users. Now it's 50%, So it's still a
Correct.
huge force in, edtech. And today, I'd say every country, there is an awareness of quizzes. We're one of probably, if not the most, globally used platform of this kind. And still, though, US, dominates. Yeah.
Awesome, yeah. That's great to know. So, Deepak, slightly shifting gears. This is 2019 now, and Quizzes is seeing healthy adoption, and you are officially sort of in a growth phase. And I know that you and Ankit both take pride in never spent a marketing dollar, and the adoption is mostly word of mouth because the product is so great. So, talk to us from a product manager's perspective. What all did you work upon in the product which helped, you gain users?
Hmm. Yeah, I think, and I think it's still a thing we are trying to, reverse engineer, right? What worked in those days. It was very organic, right? But when I look back and, it gets harder and harder to keep that pace of growth going, right? And one of the reasons is that uh, it's actually a lot easier to build a product that grows through, like through PLG, product-led growth in the early stages. And the main reason is because most people like, and it also depends, of course, what market you're in. Everything, of course, is very specific to what you're doing. But in our case, we were sort of in a place between B2B and B2C, right? Where we were building for teachers who are definitely part of like an organization, but it was being adopted directly by the teachers. So in that sense, it was a B2C sort of a thing. And with anything B2C, I think it's really about, those first few minutes, the experience on your product, right? If you can deliver like an aha moment to a teacher the first time they use your product, then, you'll have that sort of growth, right? And a part which is often underappreciated is just having a very simple, quick path to that aha experience, right? And again, it it's not something new that I'm saying. Everybody is trying to do that. Uh, but often people don't realize, I mean, that they are working counter to that when they add, say, when people put, say, an onboarding journey, right? That's actually a sign that your product doesn't have that sort of, really slick experience. If you have to tell somebody the 3 steps they have to do, then the 3 steps are not obvious. So then, work on that, right? So in our case, our product just, the homepage was basically a search bar. You would search and you would likely find a quiz that you like, because teachers, at least once we got to a certain scale, teachers basically would create the quiz they wanted, or they would find a quiz already. And then we had one way to do it with your class in this kind of a multiplayer quiz game, right? And so it was, so the aha moment for a teacher was really just seeing the reaction on their kids faces when they did a quizzes, right? And so how quick we could get to that point. It wasn't about, we had, I mean, I think we tried to do the best with everything we could, but we had a very simple interface to create a quiz. In fact, if you were using a, we would only make you sign up if you really had to sign up, right? If you wanted to just take a quiz from our library and play it with your students, we'd let you do that without even signing up, without even a prompt to sign up. Like, it would, you would do the whole thing, and at the end we'd say, if you want this report, you can download it. In fact, we yeah and so that was one, just reducing friction. And really, I think that's the biggest growth lever. Of course, you need to have that, that good experience somewhere in there. So for us, it was that, teachers could easily make a quiz. Oftentimes they wouldn't have to make the quiz at all, or they could quickly, modify an existing quiz. And then again, once they hosted the game, the kids didn't have to sign up. So again, they just saw a 6-digit code on the teacher screen, put that in, and they were practically in the game. Again, very frictionless. And that allowed us to get to that point where, and beyond that, it was actually, the fun was in playing with your friends. It wasn't that we had some, we had done a very basic thing of showing a live leaderboard on the teacher's screen, and at the end giving them a report of, how the kids performed. So while the game was going on, it really was about that, that fun atmosphere that you have when, you have 5 people, say, playing a game together. It's not fun because that, you just give a ball to 5 people, they'll have fun with it. So that was sort of, what we were able to enable by getting those 10 kids or 20 kids into a game with the questions that the teacher had decided as quickly as possible. But I think that was the core of it, and we really did everything we could. So our landing page, for example, it didn't have some, grand vision. It was just like multiplayer quiz for the classroom, like as to the point as we could be. And the next part was 3 steps how it works, and all of them just had now go and get in, which led to that search page. So again, no sign up, no nothing, right? In fact, today, if you see our platform, because now, that's what happens over time. I think when I talk to PMs who are at established companies, and including quizzes, right? That's not the experience anymore, because now, as you evolve, you have different stakeholders, right? So now we have, we sell to schools, for example. So now we want people to be signed up, even if, because we know of 10 people who sign up, half of them won't end up actually doing all this and getting activated and becoming retained users. So we want to at least know who signed up from a school, so that our sales team can say, know which school is likely to be, finding value in quizzes, right? But the more data we can give them, so then a lot of the things that gave you growth before, you sort of cut away at those things to, support other, objectives, monetization, sales, marketing, whatnot, right? So that is where it becomes honestly very difficult. But and because it is a dial, right, between say growth and revenue usually. So you have to be very then deliberate about wait, which cuts you're making or what you're prior optimizing for. And it's very okay to say that I'm optimizing for say revenue right now, and growth will take a hit. But I think it's quite tough, honestly, because say for me, I have this context of 9 years of being at quizzes from day zero. I know what worked, I know what didn't work, I know what harmed, and probably the same experiment has been tried 5 times in my tenure at quizzes. So now at least the sixth time when it comes along, I know how to say, let's not make that onboarding tutorial, right? I've done it. It's not going to work, right? But it does seem oftentimes, like that the lot of things will work. But yeah, whatever, cuts away from that quickest, time to on, aha moment will hamper your growth, yeah.
I like how Deepak is, against the onboarding process. Other
Yeah.
product leaders, please make a note.
I mean, my opinion, but
Yeah.
I do hold that one pretty strongly now.
Cool. So, Deepak, during the pandemic, when you saw massive adoption, just like going post product market fit, right? You then decided to monetize the product. Uh, how do you like? Obviously, you had said that like growth versus monetization. You kind of sort of hinted at that, but what will your users say? You must have popped that question like,
Yeah.
will adoption or like growth get impacted? Will they pay? Will they drop off?
Yeah.
How did you experiment with monetization? How did you decide like this is my buyer persona and it's okay for me to lose this kind of people or certain cohort of people? How did you approach even pricing? Right? Can you just talk about
Yeah.
monetization as a whole?
Yeah. So, right, honestly, we probably thought about that for a good, 2 years before we finally bit the bullet, because we were very apprehensive, right? We were very worried what will happen, if I put, a paywall, will people say, oh, these guys have now sold out, let's have a mass exodus. We definitely had those thoughts, right? And honestly, we spent those 1 or 2 years trying a lot of other ways to monetize without charging teachers, right? That was our goal, honestly, because we knew that, and even today that remains true, is that teachers on the platform is what drives our growth, drives, the library on quizzes, everything, right? So without teachers, quizzes doesn't work at all. So we didn't want to hamper their ability to use the product, but ultimately there was no other way. We tried a bunch of other things, and sometimes, the obvious answer is the only answer. Occam's razor, that we said we'll try this way around it, that way around it, but finally you charge the person getting the most value out of your product, and that's what worked finally. Maybe there are other ways, but we couldn't figure it out. But I think when it finally, after trying, ad-based revenue, trying monetization from parents, we tried, all, a couple of ideas, at least 3, 4 good attempts we made at things that might have worked, gamification and all this. But finally, we came back to, a subscription model for additional features, right? And so the first approach was, because again, we were so apprehensive still, it was, the price itself. We, just looked at what competition was charging. We knew we weren't worse than the competition. In fact, we probably felt we were better. So we priced at what they were, or even a little more. We felt confident to do that, but also like a kind of a round number, we started at $5 a month, because it was, in the ballpark of what people would expect. And I think it played out that way as well. A lot of people felt that was a very fair price for what Quizizz was offering. And the other thing we did is we didn't take anything away from the free product, right? That was again out of the, the fear that we had. So we added some new features, and we knew some of the, features that people had been asking for a long time. So we knew those would be popular. We didn't know though if, that would be enough for people to buy, but turned out a lot of them did buy. And over time though, as we, have gone through our monetization journey, I think, we've had to relook at, that idea of, everything that was free, keeping it free, because ultimately, we worked on that free product for 4 or 5 years. And, we had put in too much into that free product to, keep it exactly that way. So over time, we had to take away a few things also that were in free, because otherwise, there was just, it was difficult for us to just monetize on features, additional features, because we had built in a lot of what a teacher needed in our free product by that point. Yeah. But we've been able to, I think we've added a lot on the value side. And we've had to make a few cuts though to the free aspect to really make it all work. Yeah.
Awesome. So Deepak, this brings us to the end of the podcast. Thank you so much for doing this. My key takeaways would be, the 3 points would be: keep talking to the users and build by first principles, right? Especially in the early days of your startup. Then obviously regarding pricing, when you have a competitor in the market, it does give you a sort of a benchmark, what pricing you should keep at and experiment with. And third, and but not the least, don't have a onboarding on your product. So yeah. Thank you so much for doing this.
Great. It was a pleasure being on the podcast, and love what you guys are doing at PM School as well.
Thank you so much.
Thanks, Deepak.